Good evening, everybody, and welcome to We the People. Tonight, We the People meet Bryan Kim. He's a candidate for California's 53rd Congressional District, and he's running against Susan Davis, who has not updated her website, it seems, since 2011. And we're going to talk about that a little later, so she's fighting for some things that we need to update her. Anyway, Bryan Kim is here because he's not Susan Davis, and he has interest in making progress within the government in District 53 as a non-party preference and no party preference. So we're going to talk to him about that and why he made that choice, leaving the Democratic Party. But for right now, let's just welcome Bryan Kim to We the People. Thanks for joining us, Bryan.
Well, hey guys, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you for running. It's really a hard thing to do.
Yeah, well, honestly, I mean, it's a lot of fun, especially if you believe in what you're talking about and you think that there's a dramatic need in our country for things to get better. So yeah, it's very easy to spend a lot of time and energy really fighting for the things I think are important.
That is true, but as somebody who doesn't get the support of, say, a giant moneyed system, it's a lot tougher. And before we talk about that, let's bring Laura on because we're going to take questions from the audience. This is an engagement broadcast, and the lovely Laura Livengood will manage that engagement. Laura, tell them how to engage.
Well, this is an engagement broadcast, which means you have the opportunity to ask questions of our guests during the show. So if you've got a burning question for Bryan, write the word question, all in caps, or tag me, and we will ask him during the question and answer sections of the show. And I'll put his website in chat too, so you can get a sense of his main platform.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura.
You're welcome.
Bryan, so why run? I mean, I was looking at Susan Davis. She's a Democrat. She's a Democrat, and she's got a lot of money. She's been there for what seems like a long time.
Sure.
So what bothered you? Why do you want to replace her?
Yeah, so I think in the age of Donald Trump, we really need to move away from this idea of blue no matter who. I think you can see from the Hillary Clinton election that it's not enough to simply be in the race and talking about how terrible the Republicans are. We really need people who are going to be running, presenting a positive, progressive platform, one that's really going to advance the life situations of working and middle-class families all over America. And, you know, with all due respect to Susan Davis and the work that she's done when it comes to like immigrant rights and women's health, one of the biggest issues in our country and one of the main reasons why there isn't more funding for things like universal health care and tuition and debt-free colleges and trade schools is the fact that we spend over $700 billion a year on our defense budget. And the reality is that in her position as the minority chair on the Armed Services Committee, she's voted every single year with the Republicans to continue raising the defense budget. At the same time, they're cutting benefits like the GI Bill and retirement for new recruits. And I really think that we should be supporting our troops, not our defense contractors, and we should be really investing in our men and women in uniform, not buying more drones to drop on people in other countries. Because I think if you're really trying to be a feminist and an anti-racist, it's not enough to just support women and brown folks here in the United States. I think we really need to be supporting women and brown folks in other countries. And I'll tell you, drone striking women and children in Yemen and in Saudi Arabia and arming Israel so that they can fire live rounds at unarmed demonstrators, like this is not a way to build peace around the world. And we're certainly not supporting women and people of color in other countries by doing this. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I wasn't aware that she was on the Armed Services Committee, and I just want to back up to that because, you know, us fighting for freedom around the world is a different story. We'll get there, but the Armed Services Committee, you said something that I just want to. I love the clarification, and I want to know if people in your district, being that there's a lot of defense contract money in your district, and we'll look at that. We've got a slide for that. You don't have any of that, but Susan does.
Yes.
Do the people in your district understand that the $700 billion didn't go to the troops and that we're not supporting the troops by giving $700, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Well, I'll tell you, the men and women in uniform who live in the district, especially those who are in the enlisted, not in the officer class,
Right.
those people are very, very aware of the fact that more people who are active duty in our armed services than ever before in the history of this country are on food stamps and some form of social welfare right now. And I don't think that any human being, regardless of their occupation, should be in danger of losing their shelter, their food, their health care, or being denied access to education. Least of all, the men and women who have not only signed a contract to risk their own life for the country, but to take life for this country, both of which are really sacred obligations, and one that we as a nation and our ruling class in Congress fail at especially.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed with you there.
Well, thanks, man. I do my best.
Yeah, you're yelling off all those things. I don't want to mean to jump tracks real quick, but it sounds almost like you were talking about maybe kind of UBI sort of stuff there, providing basic needs.
Yeah, no, I'm a very big believer in a universal basic income. I was actually just talking about this to someone earlier today on the campaign trail about how the most fiscally conservative thing we could do would be to consolidate our social services program into genuinely providing the basic needs for people, meeting their shelter, their food, their health care, and their education requirements. Because the reality is that funneling all this money down the food stamp path, where you can spend food stamps on Red Bull, but you have to pay the nickel for the CRV in cash, these are not the most efficient or fiscally sound systems that we could really be using to make sure that, people who are either unable or currently not working or currently not capable of taking care of themselves, to make sure that they have a basic floor of social safety net. This is not a dramatic or radical idea to suggest that folks deserve enough money to live on and to really streamline all of our welfare and social services into a universal basic income.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. I don't think it's radical at all. I think it's the way we have to go, and I think it ties into automation, robotics, loss of jobs, because don't you want to work less? I want to work less.
Yeah. And I've seen one of my favorite memes going around the internet is this idea that we've created a really damaged and misprioritized society if the robots taking all the jobs has somehow become a bad thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, we know where that came from. Thank you, Terminator movie. I mean, it would have been fine until Skynet, and now we kind of and honestly, now we have Google with a defense contract working on AI with drones.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, if you're the average American working or middle class person, much more than the AI in our drone program, you should be afraid of self-driving cars, because right now there are over 3.5 million Americans that are employed in the transportation sector. Whether it is truck driving, whether it's taxi driving, whether it's Uber and Lyft, I think it's really, really important. Really important that we're recognizing the fact that self-driving cars are a reality. This is not a potential future that we're talking about. This is a thing that's happening right now.
Agreed.
Budweiser has already made their first delivery with their first automated semi-truck.
Oh, nice.
And the reality is that, it's an incredible achievement of engineering. It's an incredible achievement of science and computing. But the reality is that for 3.5 million Americans who are in the transportation sector, they're about to find themselves unemployed through no fault of their own. And we're looking at not just the transportation sector, but things like the self-checkout lane at the grocery store, things like the automated teller at the Burger King I was just at 2 weeks ago. The reality is that more and more of our jobs are going to be going to machines, and more people are going to find themselves unemployed through no fault of their own. And what are we going to do as a society when millions of people are out of a job, out of a home, and out of healthcare, simply because humans no longer need to apply for the job that they work for?
That's so true. What did we do with all the horse and buggy makers and all the accessories that went along with horse and carriages, right?
There was a lot of, if you've ever read Charles Dickens, there was a lot of a transition from the industrial era, and there's a lot of people who were in the horse and buggy industry who ended up on the streets or in the first insane asylums that were set up, as capitalism began to develop in the 1860s and 70s.
And now it seems like we're trying to leave industrialism. We've been trying to leave it for at least 50 years. We probably could have left it 50 years ago and moved into the robotics age or whatever we want to call it, the humans working less age. But instead, capitalism kind of kept that stranglehold on us at this point. And what we ended up with is an unskilled workforce that has nowhere to go, right?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I don't think it's necessarily fair to call our workforce unskilled. I think that what we've done really is develop the means of production to the point that fewer and fewer people are required to produce the requisite number of goods, to the point that we throw away billions of gallons of milk and billions of tons of cheese just to make sure that we can keep the prices high enough so these guys can make a profit. And at the end of the day, I don't like to think of folks as unskilled. I like to think of working class people as having skills that automation has simply replaced.
Sure.
And we're in an age where that's not just going to be the service workers and the factory workers. Like, we're moving towards the point that music itself is being generated by algorithm, to the point that sales distribution is no longer being done by like vice presidents of marketing. It's done by algorithm. And what are we going to, the only way forward in a society where human beings are no longer really necessary for the functioning of the economy is to tax corporate profits to the point that we can provide a sustainable living for everyone, until we live in that ideal, fully automated society where not only are our needs provided for by automation, but so are an increasing number of our luxuries. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I guess the problem with that for capitalism is that there's going to be a massive loss of profit somewhere.
Sure.
I think, right?
Yeah, well, at some point in our lifetime, at least in my lifetime, like over the next 70 to 100 years, we're going to have to make the decision of whether or not we're going to continue on this society that is fundamentally driven by the profit motive,
right,
or whether we're going to move into a society that is fundamentally driven by human need. And until we are willing to confront the reality that as long as we live in a for-profit system, our planet is going to be up for sale. As long as we live in a for-profit system, our healthcare is going to be up for sale. We're not going to make the kind of advancements we need to make as a society into a world that puts people ahead of profit. You know what I mean?
Agreed. We're not, and we're certainly doesn't seem like we're heading the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. No, not with our, called it, someone on the internet yesterday called him Cheeto Mussolini, and I could not get over how much I fucking love that.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. It's fun to call them names, and it needs to be done to be enraged. Yeah. But at the same time, like, I'm more enraged about the Congress that doesn't give a shit that he's there, right? And it's like, this is why you're running. This is why we got to replace people that aren't doing anything, either whether it's at the state level or at the federal level, right? And
yeah. Absolutely. And I think the token level of resistance the Democrats have chosen to offer him is really, really disheartening and really, really emblematic of how much money they take from super PACs, from big donors, from the capital and, stock and shareholding class. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To the point that we're about to confirm, what is her name? Gina Haspel for CIA director after she oversaw terror in Guantanamo and Iraq. Like, these are not the values that, the reason I was a Democrat until for most of my life is because we were supposed to stand up to things like torture when George W. Bush did it. And, I remember the moment I knew I was going to leave the Democratic Party. It was when Barack Obama, for the third year in a row at the State of the Union, promised that he was going to close Guantanamo Bay. And I remember out loud, just at my television, unprompted, I was like, oh, fuck you. And I had never felt that way about a Democrat president. I had not expected to feel that way about, the Black Kennedy, who I had gone and volunteered for and voted for and really believed in. And to be at that point with somebody that I had really looked up to and thought was going to make this country a better place, to kind of realize that, oh, he's beholden to, he's not going to do this, and I can't quite figure out why. And the more I investigated, the more I came to believe, and still do, that it's, you know, as long as you take money from the defense industry, you're going to vote with the defense industry. As long as you take, if you're Cory Booker, if you take money from the pharmaceutical industry, you're going to vote to stop the importing of generic drugs from Canada, even though you know they're safe, because it's going to hurt your donors' profits. You know what I mean?
You don't think Cory's come around? You don't think he's been converted?
I mean, I haven't seen some of his votes. I haven't seen his votes since then. I just remember thinking that moment, especially when we're supposed to be resisting Donald Trump. It had been less than a month of Trump being president, and they're already selling out senior citizens and disabled veterans on lowering pharmaceutical prices. And, you know, with Democrats like Cory Booker, who really needs Republicans.
Yeah, well, we can say that about the majority of the Democratic Party right now.
Yeah,
There's
right.
really little difference, and that's why progressives are having such a hard time winning anything. And we've even got, you know, you've seen it. You're not seeing it currently in your district because they have a pretty solid corporate Dem working for them, but we've seen in other districts where you've got a weak incumbent, or maybe even if it's a Republican, but the Dem party will plop an establishment choice, even though there's a solid progressive choice right there, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I shared that audio on my Facebook of someone on the DCCC pressuring a progressive candidate to try to drop out of the race because they want, because they want to make room for the incumbents. And that's one of the many reasons why I'm like, I would rather not run as a Democrat, even though I know that there's money there. I know that there's the whole network there. I think that if we're going to get anywhere in this country, we need political parties that are fundamentally anti-capitalist and fundamentally pro-worker to drive our country forward into the 21st century that we need to have, not the 21st century that benefits Jeff Bezos and the folks on the Fortune 500. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I appreciate you running as an independent, because it makes it more difficult, but it maybe shows more promise. Tim Canova,
absolutely,
right, stepped out, and I'm still working. Honestly, I'm still working with the Democratic Party here in Oregon because it's weird. It's not as progressive as it should be, but we actually have a decent insurgent stronghold. I can't name names, but you know, so we're, you know,
we never give up comrades, right?
Right, and that, so to me, it's like we're working on the inside. We got it. We're good, you know. But with you in California, it would seem so huge and so impossible. I could see that independent would make. How's the response been with
it's been phenomenal, man. We just broke $35,000 from over 2,100 individual donors.
Wow.
And it all comes from just kind of hitting the streets and really talking to people here in the district, because the reality is that working and middle class people on the ground are far more progressive than the majority of our politicians. Like 86% of the American electorate, not just Democrats, but 86% of the American electorate is in favor of net neutrality. And yet it is still a struggle for our Congress to make that happen, to the point that it comes to, you know, a vote less than a month before the net neutrality repeal is supposed to go into effect, before just the Senate can move on it, let alone the House.
Right. And that whole thing today, while it looks great for democracy, look what the Senate did. It's not it's gonna die in the House, right? I mean,
well, it may, you know, I never like to say never, but I mean, given the general trend of our Congress, and that they're here primarily as the defenders of the big telecoms, who give them all of their reelection money, at least enough of them to keep the regulations coming the way they want. You know, I don't think that things are going to really get better, because I'll never forget being 18 years old in AP Econ and learning about the idea of regulatory capture, and the idea that there comes a point when it's in a firm's best interest to invest financially in the political system, rather than like expanding capital or even paying dividends to your shareholders or raising benefits and wages. That at the end of the day, at that point, the most profitable thing for them to do is go functionally buy subsidies and buy tax breaks by investing in enough legislators to get the kind of laws and regulations that are going to help them out in the long run. And once you realize that it's not a matter of morals of like, well, good people don't do that and bad people do, that it's, wow, it's in every firm's best interest once they're a certain size to start buying politicians, you realize that there are things about the profit system that are fundamentally incompatible with the notions of a healthy democracy.
Sure. Capitalism.
Yeah, very
In
much
general.
so. The dictatorship. Well, it's the every government is a class government, and ours is just the government of the ruling class, and it's the dictatorship of the wealthy.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm going to go off a weird tangent, and then I want to see if we have any questions. Laura, we got any questions from the audience? No, nothing right now. All right, you guys ask some questions. I see you there talking about stuff.
They're talking about all kinds of things, but they're not asking any questions yet. Well, yeah. I've been dropping your website though, which has a lot of information, so I think they're digesting that and
Good. Well, now I don't remember what I was going to bring up, but I want to talk about your district. Let's look at this. So this is your district, which is definitely gerrymandered. Is that what we're
seeing is the map of the district up on the thing right now?
Yeah, and it's okay. So we're seeing the green blob there that kind of surrounds San Diego-ish.
Yeah.
A lot of defense money in there because Susan has a lot of it.
Sure.
So what is your constituency? What is that made of? What's going on in there?
Yeah, so I mean, the district is around like 60 to 65% Democrat. It's a healthy, like, ethnic and kind of class blend. But the majority of the people who live there are working and middle class, and that they either work for somebody else or they own their own business and have a semi-decent income. And Susan Davis really only represents like the large businesses and the shareholders of the large businesses in that district that donate to her campaign. The folks like Raytheon, the folks like Lockheed Martin, and we need to be bringing and fighting for at the forefront of our policy, not just boost to the defense budget, but we need to be on the front lines of social struggles all over the country. Like the fact that here in California, we have employment protections for LGBTQ folks is fantastic. But the fact that there are still over 30 states where you can get fired for being gay and over 46 where you can get fired for being trans, like these are the kind of issues where, because the people in our district are okay, Susan Davis is okay not being a more vigorous champion for those issues. When in the age of Donald Trump, if we really believe in the things like we're all in this together and not an inch backward, we need to sincerely be fighting for not an inch backward and we're all in this together. You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, and really what you're saying, you said it before and I forgot to catch it. It was a good statement, but really resistance doesn't make progress.
Yeah.
I mean, resistance, it's like if the best it can ever do is not move backwards.
Yeah. And exactly. And, we watched Hillary Clinton spend an entire campaign cycle not being Donald Trump and being very adamant that Donald Trump would be worse than she was, but she never really gave any of us a really good reason to vote for her. She didn't have a vision for where she was trying to take the country. And the only two people, sad to say, who had a vision were Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. And when one of them was their party's nominee for the presidency and the other was not, it was not surprising to me that Trump won.
Yeah, sadly, I guess I could see that. Hillary gave us a reason. You're right, it wasn't a good one, but her reason was her.
Sure.
Right? Because it's my turn. You just said Donald Trump had a vision, and I just want to say no. No, he didn't.
His vision. I mean, he absolutely had a vision. His vision was to build up a border wall. His vision was to privatize education. His vision was to cut taxes for the rich. Like, I don't think it's smart to pretend that he didn't have, a terrifying plan for the country. And when people are like, I can't believe that he's so rude to immigrants, or I can't believe that they're breaking up families on the border, it's like, he's doing all the things he said that he would do at every single one of those rallies, except for try to lock up Hillary Clinton.
Well, I covered a lot of that stuff when the primaries, and it's confusing because actually he said a lot of Bernie-esque things, just coming from a more I don't know, a rougher thing. That's what made him confusing was, he
Yeah.
was going to take care of everybody, and he was going to defend the LGBTQ community. He was going to do all those things.
Yeah.
He was going to make DACA better. He was going to, he said
Yeah.
whatever the hell he wanted. And
Well-
then when he got in office, he was like, oh, I didn't mean any of that shit, which makes him really no different than Democrats. He's not all that different. It's just,
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
yeah. So anyway, yeah, with the Hillary, yeah. I wanted to talk. We were talking about money. We were talking about defense and where it came from. I just wanted to show everybody here. This is Susan Davis's funds. Some of it, 23,000 currently in this cycle from defense, electronics, miscellaneous defense, Honeywell International, Carpenters, and joiners.
Yeah.
What else do we got here?
About Honeywell.
Yeah, Honeywell. This is what she's raised. That's as of 3/31/28. Top contributors, right? Those Caterpillar. I'm sure they have a lot to do with making things. The American Federation of Teachers. Find that interesting. See, that's all that defense, aerospace.
She's got union support from some of the Democrat unions. You know what I mean? Because the Democrats have historically been better defenders of not just the unions, but of the union bureaucrats that are at the top.
Exactly. So yeah, and that's true. And as we're learning, a lot of these unions, when they make a decision on where to send their money, they're not made by the union members. It's a committee or a board of people, right?
Yeah.
That were all paid or that are all on the take.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and that's the thing I always try when people, especially when I meet more moderate or conservative folks who are kind of opposed to unions, I try to remind them it's like, you're not opposed to unions, you are opposed to union bureaucrats and the fact that like not all unions are equally democratic.
Right.
And it's really important, more than just fighting for a union, it's fighting for union democracy and really making sure that the union that you're building is not one that's about entrenching a couple guys at the top for the rest of their lives, but one that's about responding to the needs and values of the working class folks that are there that make that business run. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, exactly. And I like that you said that, because if we could really take the time to dissect words, and when we go back to the old Republican values, when they had, I'm just going to use the word values, old Republican talking points, and the one that they used to have was, we don't like big government. Right? Remember when the Republicans were about not having a deficit and fixing?
Yeah.
But the big government. But it's not opposed to big government. If we had a ginormous government, which we do, that'd be fine as long as it was efficient and worked on behalf of the people, right?
Yeah.
If it's
well, I mean, and I think the idea of small government is more of a talking point.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a fantasy in the 21st century when we live in a world that's more interconnected than it's ever been. The idea that you don't need strong like protection and oversight over cyber attacks, the idea that you don't need strict rules holding our local police accountable for following the law seems to me to be a bit of an outmoded idea. Because I'll tell you, you can tell that conservatives, when the Ted Cruz type conservatives, and I don't mean the libertarians, I mean the Ted Cruz type conservatives, when they say things like, we're in favor of small government, they're not actually in favor of small government. They're in favor of lower taxes, because they're fine with the government stopping you from being gay. They're fine with the government stopping you from providing abortions. They're fine with the government stopping you from smoking pot, but they just don't want government interfering with business and the profit motive. And it's an ideological construction at its most pure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we'll talk about why we have those issues in a bit. I want to go to some other. I want to talk about some core issues, and one of them, because I think this is important, healthcare. And I just want to get a statement from you on where you stand on healthcare. What do you think we need to do for Californians?
Yeah, so I think I think we should follow in Bernie Sanders' footsteps and pass the Medicare for All plan that he introduced in the Senate. We are the only major country on the planet that doesn't provide universal health care as a right to its citizens. And it is not because we cannot afford to, it is because we choose not to. There are hundreds of billions of dollars in savings, not just from lowered administrative costs by moving through Medicare, but in lower prescription drug costs, because the government is able to negotiate on such a large scale. And I'll tell you, if you're a fiscal conservative, the policy that you should support more than almost any other in California is universal health care, because we're talking about paying for preventative medicine instead of only paying for emergency care. Because right now in California, if you get a little infection on your arm, you can't go to the doctor and just pay $100 worth of antibiotics for free. You have to wait until that infection is an emergency, and then you have to go to the ER when it's a $10,000 surgery and treatment now. And the taxpayers are on the hook either way. We should be investing in preventative care, not in emergency care. And that's the reason why universal health, among many reasons, that's why we need universal health care.
Yeah, and let's, before I show you show everybody the fun slide, let's get down to the core issue here.
Sure.
It really doesn't, it's not about money, really. We know that, right?
Yeah.
If we can fund the military to whatever ridiculous amount, we can fund Medicare, right? We could fund whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
It comes down to profit in the insurance industry and the defense of that profit, and maybe even the defense of jobs for people. So what would you, if you're in power now, what would you say to the insurance companies about that profit?
I would count, if you want my honest opinion, I would tell them that they are lucky that they are getting away without going to jail. Because the reality is that when you are denying people health care through their inability to pay, you don't shop for health care the way that you shop for a car. You don't shop for your doctor the way that you shop for luxuries or anything else in life. When it's life and death, there is no elasticity to your demand. You need to get to the doctor. If you're diabetic, you need insulin. If you have cancer, you need therapy. And the idea that we're going to protect the profits of people who are already multi-billionaires in a health insurance industry is preposterous.
Yeah. But the alternative, I think, we go with Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All, and we keep pushing that forward, is that we end up with really our government, that big government, is negotiating prices for us, right? Yeah. And we have to trust what they're doing there.
Yeah, and I think it's real, and that's all the more reason why we need democratic oversight, of why we need to get non-corporate candidates so we can have concrete populist democratic oversight of our country. And sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, it's quite all right. You're talking democratic oversight, and I just wanted to clarify and make sure you're talking about...
there's democratic oversight in our government, and the fact that we're able to vote for our Congress means that we have infinitely more control over a government healthcare system than we ever will over a private healthcare system that we're not the major shareholders of the CEOs of. You know what I mean?
That's such the easiest way to explain it. I love that.
Yeah.
We have better control over our own government than we ever will over corporations. So, and that's the truth.
Yeah, it's like, you tell me who's more accountable, like Donald Trump or the Koch brothers. And at the end of the day, Donald Trump, sad as it is much more accountable to the American people, because in 4 years, we can vote him out of the office of the presidency. And in 4 years, unless Charles and David Koch by some miracle die, they're still going to be running Koch Industries. Right.
That's basically what it comes down to. Laura Livengood, do we have any questions in the audience? No? You guys?
Yeah, what's going on over there across the interwebs?
They're having a good conversation. I can see that. They're just
they're just not talking about the show.
They're there. But that's all right. I want to show you where Susan Davis, everybody, this is fun. We went to Susan Davis's website. This is the incumbent. And actually, I tell the full story, because our volunteers build this. We have volunteer staff that puts together beautiful graphics presentations, slides, and they do research on the candidate that we're interviewing, including all of the opponents and the incumbent. And so I'm going through an article that was published late April of this year, and it's got a quote from Bryan Kim, and it's talking about Susan Davis's. This is her campaign website, not her. There's a house.gov Susan Davis thing that they put up for all the reps. This is her campaign website, which she should be campaigning, right? Anyway,
trying to earn people's votes, at least in theory.
You would think. I mean, I know she's got the defense contract money and shit, but people vote. Dollars don't vote, sort of. Anyway, this is from her website. First, she's breaking news from 2011. She's defending the Affordable Care Act. and she's been standing up to attacks on the ACA and opposing the numerous attempts to repeal the laws. So we're proud of Susan for doing that. I wonder, I don't know that there's any other information we can have for Susan on how she feels about affordable health care for all or Medicare for all or where we move forward. Have you heard her make any statements or have you had any conversations with her?
I mean, she is one of those Democrats that is like generally in favor of universal health care. But if you press her to make a concrete fight and a stink about the single payer system, she's not the candidate to go march in the street. She is not the one who's going to go speak to the nurses union and help organize strikes. She's certainly not the kind of leader and activist politician that we need in 2018.
Okay, I'll go there. So she could talk a lot about it, but when it comes down to the vote, we're probably not going to see anything there.
I mean, if someone else brings it to the table and does all of the legwork and makes it easy for her, I'm sure she'll vote in favor of it. But when it comes, that's not what's going in 2018 in a Republican-controlled House with Donald Trump as our president. Being a good tag along and being a good soldier is not what we need from progressives. It is not what we need from any kind of resistance movement. You know what I mean?
Well, again, that's the resistance versus progress. She's a resistance Democrat. We need a progress Democrat because we need her to take action on it. So, and I'm just going to jump to this. It's just so fun. Everybody, this is on her website right now, and I just want you to see that she is still a leader in Congress working to repeal the discriminatory don't ask, don't tell policy that was actually repealed in 2011. And I bring this up because, I mean, this is the article. So I should have done this first if I'd been thinking. Congressional District 53 Rep. Susan Davis faces no major challengers. Love how they decide to put that in the title. I wonder who the San Diego Union Tribune is going for. Titles are important. Journalists know this. There's a reason that was written like that. Okay. And they feel like she's facing no major challengers, and so does she, because she doesn't give a shit about her campaign website, and it hasn't been updated since 2011, which is an embarrassment.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I mean, the reality is that according to the conventional wisdom, and I would say in the pre-Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump era, the idea that I am not a serious threat is accurate, but we are not in the pre-Bernie Sanders and pre-Donald Trump era. We are in the kind of era where a reality television star who's in the WWE Hall of Fame and is most famous for losing a lot of money and marrying beautiful women is our president. And Bernie Sanders was able to raise over $200 million in small donations on a democratic socialist platform. And the game has changed dramatically, and I don't think that she or anyone else are really as aware of it as they should be. I think a lot of people are going to be mildly surprised when I come in second in June, and I think a lot of people are going to be shocked when straw polls in August and September have us running close.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's important. The beauty of all of this first run, really, of progressives, and the reason I thank you so much for doing it, as much as it sucks, right? Because we as an organization or as a machine for electing progressives, we don't quite have our shit together yet. We're still working on it. We're not unified, really. We should be by 2020. But I mean, regardless, you've got the top two thing, which is great. So you move forward. There's other people running, but they're not even here. I'm going to show you that in terms of monies, you're doing okay when in terms of progressive monies.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as, the only candidate that's completely grassroots funded without any corporate, party, or political action committee money.
Yeah. Look at that, everybody. So Susan Davis, I mean, now that says raised $202,000, but she's got a lot of others sitting around because she's Susan Davis. If she needed more money, I'm sure she could just go talk to somebody and, hey, help me out here. Or they'll come along and tell her not to support single payer or any kind of Medicare for all and give her money.
And I think the thing is that, she might be able to raise more money, but the reality is that she's already raised almost 7 or 8 times what we've been able to raise. And if we start getting close, given how many seats the Democratic Party is sincerely trying to flip from Republicans in this district, I think most serious Democratic strategists would look at her, an almost 10-term sitting congresswoman with more money, against an independent 30-year-old with, a foot of hair who's never run for office before. And I think they'd look at her if she asked for money and say, look, if you can't beat this kid on your own, you probably don't deserve to keep your seat, and we'll get someone to knock him out in 2020.
Nice. Well, and that's a great way to look at it. I think what it does is pressure her to put up or shut up. And that's what I love about it. It's like, hey, all of you incumbents that thought you were just going to sit there in a career and resist, you've got a challenger that's wants to make progress, and you're knocking at the door. They know this, and if they want to stick their head in the sand for the campaign, hey.
Yeah,
right?
I sincerely think that one of the best things that I have going for me is the idea that I'm going to be able to catch people by surprise, because right now in this district, no one is sincerely thinking about unseating Susan Davis except for me. And of the two of us, she is not really planning on having to run a serious campaign to defend her seat, whereas I have spent the last year planning to beat her and thinking of all the different eventualities that are going to come up, especially if she starts to realize that she's in trouble. So there has never been, one of the things that wins battles is not necessarily firepower, superiority, technology, or morale, but it's the element of surprise. And it's being the one who strikes first. And in this situation, for better or for worse, that is me.
Absolutely. It's fantastic. And honestly, this is optimistic. Because
thank you, my friend. I do my best.
You're good. I've interviewed a lot of folks.
Well, I certainly didn't work this hard planning on losing. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. And you're not going to lose either way, because your move is pressuring her to do something, and that's what I love about this. And regardless of what happens, you are now a seasoned candidate, and so I urge you to move into whatever the next role could possibly be in government, because you will now have that network, that power, that season, all of that stuff. And that's how we build this progressive movement, right?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And I think things like this are really, really important, being able to build the kind of progressive media network that's really going to be able to reach folks and make people who are in the revolutionary working and middle class aware of the ideas and the opportunities that are there, that we don't have to leave our government in the hands of the wealthy. The worst thing we can do is choose not to fight, especially when we live in the kind of country where we can raise money from working and middle class people if we have the courage to get out there and make it happen. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. We're seeing it happen right now. I mean, we didn't have the best of results, Tuesday night. Oregon certainly didn't have the best of results, but we did have some progressive wins. And I saw a ticker that said that we've had 41 seats flipped to Democrat since 2016. Okay. That's 41 seats. That's a good number.
Yeah, right? Absolutely it is. And I think that it's more important than just flipping the seats from the Democrat or from the Republicans is really making sure the kind of people that we get into office are anti-corporate candidates. Well, because I would much rather see people who are, even conservative minded, who are grassroots funded, because at least I know what they're saying and what they're voting on, they sincerely mean, and they're not going to flip at the drop of a hat just to keep the money coming in. You know what I mean?
It's really difficult, because think about it.
That was a very polite way to disagree with me. I appreciate it.
I don't disagree with you. I go back and forth, because I look at people like Doug Jones. Okay. Doug Jones is a corporate Democrat through and through.
Yeah.
But he's not as piece of shit as whoever it was he was running against.
Sure.
So, and yes, it's
Roy Moore. He's a paragon of virtue, but when it comes to the kind of votes that people who are losing their homes, or people who are actively either in pain or dying because they can't afford health care, better than the Republicans is not going to be good enough. At the rate that climate, I was talking to Jeff, and I both used to work at Greenpeace, and I was talking about this earlier. It's when we're standing on the edge of the shore due to the climate change disaster, we tried our best, and hey, we were better than the Republicans is not going to make us feel any fucking better. You know what I mean?
Right. It's
we're talking about a world historical climate disaster that we're actively like exponentially inching towards every single day, and we need people who are not just going to be okay. We need dramatic change now.
Agreed. Well, glad you moved to climate, because I was just
Yeah.
going to ask, but before we touch on climate, any questions out there, you guys? No? Wow, this has been like one of the most best behaved. It's because you're hitting on all the stuff, really. And expanding electrons, I saw your donation. Thank you. This is a user-funded show. We're donation-funded. We also do not have any corporate interests, and I gave up on grants. 41 seats, but 30 of them are corrupt, he says. So I'll have to look into that. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know enough about them.
Yeah, it's there's been some good strong wins, and we're gonna have to go back and take a look at that. But that's the hard part. Are you a good Democrat or a bad Democrat?
Yeah, well, I saw in the Pennsylvania State Assembly that 4 women who were members of the Democratic Socialists of America won seats in the state assembly, and 2 of them unseated incumbent Democrats in the assembly race, which was really, really, really exciting to see. And I think
it is.
As much as I would urge folks in the DSA to run as independents or as members of the DSA and not as Democrats, I think that wins like that are important because it puts the fear in corporate Democrats, and I think it shifts the Overton window to the left away from kind of the alt-right rhetoric that we've seen be so prevalent in the media and get so much coverage and press. I would like to see more reform socialists get elected and make gains, so that way we can kind of continue to move in a more forward-thinking direction.
Agreed. So talk about climate. I mean, I'm with you.
Talk about climate.
Here's the thing, like California, geez, you're not in like the best of places there with climate, and you have Brown, who for some reason gets touted as a green governor when he's fracking the crap out of your state, and have a fault line there, ocean, or you got all these problems. How fast do you think we need to move, and what would you do if you could in California?
I think one of the we need to move immediately. Like the climate disaster is accelerating every single day. As I said earlier, these are dynamic systems where small changes can have exponential effects in the long term.
Right.
Biggest thing I would like to see us do is eliminate our subsidies to the coal and oil industry.
Yeah.
And that money on a multi-billion, if not $1 trillion green jobs program, putting hundreds of thousands and millions of Americans back to work all over the country, retraining folks who are in the fossil fuels and natural gas into the green jobs industry, so we can provide folks with the training and the capital to really transition our entire economy here at home towards a 50, 80, and then eventually 100% renewable economy, and become the leader, not just in green jobs, but in the manufacturing and research and development of green technology in the United States and all over the world. And I don't think that this is a revolution that needs to be limited to California. In fact, it's almost
can't be
pointless. It's pointless. It's pointless if it is. We need to make sure that this is an energy revolution that's taking place across the planet, because we are rapidly running out of time. We're rapidly running out of time in order to make the changes we need to maintain our civilization at its current level of production, because there is a theoretical point of environmental collapse at which we permanently damage our ability to produce energy and produce goods on this planet. Like if we use all the rare earth metals on this run and then have a giant war, there's not just more lithium in the ground somewhere. Once we use up what we have, it is gone. And if we're not able to replicate our computing, if we're not able to advance and replicate and continue our computing power going forward, we're going to get stuck on the planet Earth instead of really being able to explore space and achieve that kind of Star Trek future, and we'll head down what could be unfortunately termed as the Mad Max future.
Well, yeah, I guarantee you climate change is going to wipe us out as a species before we run out of rare earth minerals. And but I get where you're coming from. And it's you mentioned that Star Trek future. My guess is you're around my age because you picked a song from Skid Row to go out with. I'm 48.
Yeah, no, I just turned 30 this year.
Oh, you're young and shit.
I'm a big fan of good metal.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. All right. Well, I'll let you slide on Skid Row, but their hair metal.
Be nice to Sebastian Bach. He's got a great voice.
Does he
Great
still?
hair too. Oh yeah, absolutely. No, he was on Broadway in like the mid 2000s.
Oh, seriously? I had no
Oh
idea.
yeah, no, he played Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He was fantastic. And then he
Holy
was,
shit. I was wondering what
Jesus in Jesus Christ Superstar.
Did he really? Well, he was one of the prettiest looking guys I knew back in 1989.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Beautiful.
yeah. Anyway, I lost my whole freaking point on that.
Anyway, so aside from Skid Row,
Aside from Skid Row and talking about California and Jerry Brown, everything. So what? Oh, we have a question. Wait a minute. What's the question, Laura?
I will help you guide your decision making here.
Thank you.
Jilly says, should Jerry Brown be sued for allowing fracking and offshore drilling?
should Jerry Brown personally be sued? I mean, I think we should sue the office of the governor, because the reality is that, like, anytime that we can put the cost of environmental damage back onto the companies and politicians that cause it and allow it to happen, I am 100% in favor of that. And, you know, maybe the governor should lose the house and the savings that he has if people have died or been poisoned as a result of fracking. Like, we allow our business people and our politicians to get away with the kind of environmental degradation that shortens lifespans and kills people, that if, you know, they were to do this directly through murder or manslaughter rather than indirectly through environmental degradation and the mass poisoning of parts of our society, I think those folks would be in jail. And especially if, you know, if and when these fracking operations cause mass damage, yeah, I think that they should not only be sued, but I really think that there should be jail time for not just folks that, you know, frack here in California, but all those copper mines that are out in Montana that have just been left with open leach pits. Like, you know, those rivers flow to Oregon and to California, and we need to make sure that our waterways are protected, whether they're here in California or out in Montana. So yeah, no, I think a lawsuit, I think if politicians like Jerry Brown and, you know, the fracking companies get off with lawsuits, I think they're lucky, because I think those folks should go to jail.
Thanks. Agreed. I was about to say something to tag onto that, like Exxon, as far as a corporation, considering they've lied for decades and knew about climate. They're complicit in raping the planet, you know?
Oh, absolutely. No, you can't be, one is not an innocent oil executive. You know what I mean? If you made your profits and your decisions on fossil fuels in the last 40 years, you are absolutely guilty of crimes against our planet. Like, it's mind-blowing.
And the audacity of the CEOs. I don't know if you saw Rexon today made a statement warning us about ethics and integrity problems within the White House.
Rex Tillerson, wait, oh really?
Yeah, Rex Tillerson made a, like, you have any moral standing, dude? You know?
Yeah, right. Well, the former CEO, when we're taking our moral cues from the former CEO of ExxonMobil, and he genuinely seems like one of the lesser corrupt ones in a cabinet, our fucking country's in bad shape, my friend.
Like he was one of the first people to you know, say it like it was. This guy's a moron.
Yeah, like not corrupt, but like when he's one of the less corrupt ones,
yes.
Like we're in a bad state. We're in bad shape, fellas.
Absolutely right. And the only way to fix this, and this is just to everybody, and the only way to fix this is what Bryan is doing right here, and that is run for office and replace the people that are doing this shit.
And run without corporate money, because I tell you, like, you can't take money from the health insurance companies and turn around and vote for single payer. You can't take money from the pharmaceutical companies and make sure that people are going to get cheap drugs. And you can't take money from the big banks and make sure that our banks are going to be held accountable for the lack of regulation and the lack of foresight that they have and continue to demonstrate when it comes to our economy.
Exactly.
Yeah, we need anti-corporate candidates. And, you know, that is if I could leave people watching this with one thing, it's don't just vote for me. We need to build the kind of independent movement that is not tied to a corporate party like the Democrats or a corporate party like the Republicans. We need a working and middle class movement.
Right. That well said. That's tied to the issues.
Absolutely.
That we all face. Bryan Kim, you've been fantastic. I Appreciate you being on the
Yeah,
show.
thank you guys for having me. Are we done already?
Yeah, it's like an hour. We're coming up on
Yeah.
it. We're going to show everybody a slide of your information, where they can get a hold of you. So tell everybody where they can go, where your website, social media. and
Yeah,
what you
so
need
my
for help.
website is just www.bryankim2018.com, just like it says on that sign right there.
There you
Oh,
go.
we have that on the screen. That's beautiful. I'm on Facebook. I am on YouTube. I am on Twitter. And then, yeah, I'm the only candidate that's completely grassroots funded. Please give as much as you can if you're not in the district. If you'd like to phone bank and volunteer, I would love your support.
This is an easy one, Californians, because Brian's going to be the number 2 pick. I mean, if you look at the stats and look at what's going on and you look at who's in the race right now, he's the number 2 pick, and that means he has a great chance to become the progressive Democrat in 53. Okay.
Independent.
Right. Independent. And actually, let's be totally clear, no party preference, because there's an independent party that is conservative, and we don't want to confuse you
Yes,
with
there
that
is
party.
the American Independent Party, which is basically, they were the alt-right before it was cool. Yeah, no, I am no party. Yeah, actually independent.
Yeah, you're not that group. Let's so my bad. Not a Democrat, just a
Yeah, I'm
person.
not racially qualified for the alt-right, so.
Ouch, ouch.
What? It's true.
Yes, we didn't even have time to address that issue.
Sure.
Bryan Kim, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for running.
Yeah,
Laura,
thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great. This was fun. We will probably have you back as we get closer to things going on.
Yeah, let me know if you need anybody to comment on anything, like the nature of the dying capitalist machine.
That
when you're number 2, we will bring you in and talk about your path to the general. So
There you go.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it'll be. Laura, live and good. Do we have anything coming up?
Nope.
Wow.
I have nobody booked for next week.
We are working on
Have me back.
possibly. What?
What you doing next Wednesday, Brian?
I was gonna say nothing.
Now
So
I got
just,
you dialed
just
in.
campaign, and I can pencil you guys in.
Oh, yes.
I'll call you.
We just finished Oregon, and now is California next, or do we go to Washington? What's next, Laura?
No, California's next. Washington isn't until July or August.
There's a gentleman named Kenneth Mejia, Mejia, who's running for the Green Party in LA, who'd be great to have on if you haven't.
If he would answer my emails, he'd be on.
Kenneth. If you know him, give him a shout.
Yeah, just spank him. I've been trying to get him.
All right, so Skid Row, live in Japan, 1989. We're doing the live version because that's the one we can get away with.
Beautiful.
But you get a shirtless Sebastian Bach, everybody. So, all right.
Okay.
And Here I Am. Why'd you pick this song?
Honestly, I think I like that it's loud. I like that it's aggressive, and I really like the guitar riff. It's rock and roll. It doesn't need an explanation.
Easy enough. Well, that's great. Thank you, Bryan Kim, for being on. Here is
Thank you guys.
Row.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank y'all.
Here, Stay But all I got to say is here I am. Close your eyes and I'll be stupid. Here I am. Come on, sing on nothing like it. She broke a billion hearts. I'll sink it never knew. With a German cigarettes and designer attitude. No, what can I do? You go with now, the first time any's eyes on you. They must be conversation. Got to let you know I'm here. I am. Close your eyes and I'll be super. Here I am. Come on, take my life and while you can. Without a crystal ball. Alright! Here I am. Close your eyes and I'll be Superman. Here I am. Come on, take my love and away and come and down to what I say. Here I am. Close your eyes and I'll be Superman. Here I am. Come on, take my love and away and come. See you later, Japan! I see us, people! Tomo arigato! We'll see you next time!